Since the dawn of humanity, secrets have always fascinated people. Hidden societies, unrevealed mysteries, and messages concealed within the lines of history create an irresistible aura of curiosity. But what if I told you that Jesus' disciples may have formed a secret group right after his resurrection? A movement that had to hide in the shadows, protecting knowledge that should not fall into the wrong hands. Could this group have existed? And furthermore, could their traces still be found in history? To understand this possibility, we need to go back in time and analyze the turbulent context in which Christ's followers lived. The first century of the Christian era was marked by an environment of persecution and fear. After the crucifixion, the apostles faced a harsh reality. They were seen as heretics by traditional Judaism and as potential agitators by the Roman Empire. This forced them to take refuge and seek ways to convey their teachings without drawing attention. The first Christian communities emerged as small scattered groups, often hidden in caves, catacombs, or discreet locations to avoid reprisals. It was in this context that the first indications of something bigger possibly taking place arose. The need to encode messages and hide teachings became essential. But was this just a survival strategy? Or was there something even deeper behind this practice? Many scholars suggest that the use of symbols such as the fish and the anchor may have been more than mere identification codes. Some historians believe that these emblems carried secret meanings, indicating a more advanced level of knowledge transmitted only to initiates. This type of practice was not uncommon at the time. Various spiritual traditions used codes and metaphors to protect teachings considered sacred, and early Christians may have followed this same pattern. The apocryphal Gospels, texts that were excluded from the official Bible, offer intriguing clues about the possibility of a closed circle within early Christianity. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, contains speeches attributed to Jesus that suggest there were hidden teachings, revealed only to certain disciples. In one passage, Jesus says, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear," a phrase that suggests the existence of a wisdom reserved for a few. And what if this secret wisdom was the real reason why the early Christians had to act clandestinely? Perhaps persecution wasn't the only factor that forced them to hide. There may have been a special doctrine, taught only to those who were prepared to understand it. This idea aligns with many esoteric traditions, which advocate for the existence of levels of knowledge within spiritual schools. Another intriguing point are the reports of specific persecutions targeted at certain disciples and groups within the early Christian movement. Historical records suggest that the first Christians were not just randomly persecuted. There was a concern to eliminate those who held a certain type of knowledge. What exactly did they know that made them so dangerous to the authorities of the time? It's also worth highlighting the possibility that this knowledge may have been preserved through secret societies over the centuries. Some believe that groups like the Essenes, a mystical Jewish community that existed at the same time as Jesus, may have influenced this hidden tradition. Other theorists draw connections to later movements, such as the Gnostics and even the Templars in the Middle Ages. If this group truly existed, where is their evidence? The answer might be found in the subtext of ancient texts. Often, hidden knowledge is not completely erased, but rather coded, so that only those with the right understanding can access it. After all, history has always been written by the victors, and those who held alternative knowledge were silenced, but perhaps not completely erased. Given so many clues and gaps in the official history, the big question remains: did a secret group of disciples of the Way survive over time? And if so, what kind of knowledge did they hold? To answer this question, we need to delve deeper and analyze the fate of the apostles after the resurrection. What happened to them? Were they merely missionaries, or did they play a much larger role in preserving hidden knowledge? After the resurrection, Jesus' closest followers faced a dilemma that would change the history of the world: how to continue his message without becoming immediate targets of the Jewish and Roman authorities. The sudden disappearance of some disciples from historical records raises an intriguing question. Did they simply follow different paths? Or did they establish a closed circle, accessible only to initiates? The traditional narrative states that the apostles dispersed to preach the gospel in different parts of the world. However, this dispersion seems to have been, in many cases, shrouded in mystery. Few reliable details are available about their journeys, and some traditions suggest that certain disciples vanished from conventional history. Could they have joined a secret society, operating in the shadows to ensure that Christ's teachings were not corrupted? Pedro, for instance, went to Rome, where he supposedly laid the foundation of what would later become the Catholic Church. However, his actual role during this early period remains shrouded in controversy. Some sources suggest that he kept in touch with small groups of initiated followers, imparting to them a special knowledge that was not openly shared with everyone. The very concept of apostolic succession, the idea that certain spiritual leaders directly inherited the knowledge of the apostles, may indicate the existence of a reserved group, guarding secrets passed down from master to disciple. Another name that sparks speculation is Thomas. Traditionally, he is believed to have traveled to India, where he founded Christian communities. However, some legends suggest that his mission went beyond conventional preaching. The Gospel of Thomas, an apocryphal text discovered in the 20th century, contains teachings of Jesus that differ from the canonical Gospels. Instead of emphasizing dogmas or strict rules, the text suggests a path of self-knowledge and enlightenment, closer to mystical traditions than to Christian orthodoxy. Could Thomas have carried this secret knowledge to a select group? James, brother of Jesus, also had a crucial role, but his presence disappears from official records after a certain period. Some sources assert that he led the early church in Jerusalem, but there are indications that his view on Christianity was different from that of Peter and Paul. Documents such as the Dead Sea Scrolls suggest that there was a division among early Christian groups, with one of them possibly preserving exclusive teachings. But perhaps the most enigmatic case of all is that of Mary Magdalene. In some traditions, she is portrayed as one of Jesus' closest disciples, playing a prominent role in the original movement. However, her figure was gradually erased or distorted over the centuries. Gnostic texts describe her as someone who received special teachings directly from Christ, raising the possibility that she may have played a key role in transmitting hidden knowledge. If these disciples possessed special knowledge, why not share it with everyone? The answer may lie in the brutal repression that the early Christians faced. Persecution came not only from the outside, but also from within. When Christianity began to become more institutionalized, alternative views were classified as heretical and excluded from official doctrine. Keeping certain teachings secret could have been a way to protect them from distortion and destruction. Another evidence that suggests the existence of a closed group are the references to secret initiations within early Christianity. Some ancient writings mention specific ceremonies reserved only for those who were ready to receive the greater knowledge. This aligns with the idea that the original disciples not only preached openly, but also preserved esoteric teachings for those who were prepared. And there is also an intriguing detail: the use of codes and metaphors in sacred texts. Many passages from the Gospels can be interpreted on different levels, depending on the reader's level of understanding. Phrases like, "Those who have ears to hear, let them hear," suggest that there was something more to be understood beyond the literal meaning. This could be an indication that profound knowledge was only shared with those who were part of an inner circle. Paul's own writings reinforce this hypothesis. In his letters, he mentions mysteries and hidden wisdoms reserved for those who were spiritually ready. Although later Christianity interpreted this figuratively, there is the possibility that he was actually referring to a teaching restricted to a select few. What does all this tell us? Could it be that the disciples of the Way formed a hidden network, protecting secrets that could change our understanding of Jesus and his message? Or could these clues just be coincidences interpreted through a modern lens? Either way, the story remains filled with gaps, and these gaps leave room for questions. Now, if there really was a hidden knowledge, what was its content? What would Jesus have taught to this exclusive group of disciples? To understand this issue, we need to delve into the texts considered forbidden and the clues left by esoteric traditions. After all, if there was a secret society, its greatest wealth was not power or influence, but rather a knowledge that could transform humanity's worldview. If there was a secret group among the early followers of Jesus, what would be the true purpose of its existence? What were they trying to preserve that couldn't be disclosed to the general public? To answer this question, we need to look beyond canonical texts and explore alternative sources that suggest Jesus imparted esoteric teachings to a select circle of disciples. Many believe that Christ's message was simple and accessible to all. However, if we analyze the Gospels carefully, we find several moments where he indicates that some teachings were not for everyone. In the Gospel of Mark, for example, Jesus says, "To you has been given the mystery of the kingdom of God, but to those on the outside, everything is said in parables." This suggests that there was a difference between what was publicly stated and what was privately taught to the closest disciples. This distinction between public and private knowledge is common in ancient spiritual traditions. In Egypt, Greece, and even in Judaism, there were mystery schools where only the initiated could access deeper truths. Could it be that Jesus' disciples were part of a similar tradition? The so-called Gnostic Gospels, discovered in Nag Hammadi in 1945, suggest that, indeed. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, presents a Jesus who does not teach dogmas, but rather a path of inner enlightenment. In one of his most enigmatic passages, he states, "Those who seek should continue seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. When they are disturbed, they will marvel, and then they will reign over the all." This suggests a process of spiritual awakening that requires effort and deep understanding, something very different from the blind faith preached afterwards. Another interesting document is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, where she is depicted as someone who received special teachings from Jesus. In it, the other disciples question her authority, and Peter, troubled, asks, "Did the Savior really say these things to a woman?" This passage indicates that there was a dispute over who possessed the true knowledge transmitted by the Master. If these scriptures contain fragments of a hidden teaching, what exactly did it deal with? Some clues indicate that the focus was not on moral rules or fixed doctrines, but rather on self-knowledge and direct experience with the divine. This concept is close to what we find in Eastern spiritual traditions, such as Buddhism and Hinduism, where enlightenment is achieved through introspection and the dissolution of the ego. This esoteric view also appears in some passages of the canonical Gospels. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus states, "The kingdom of God is within you." This idea contrasts with the later notion of an external heavenly kingdom and suggests that true awakening occurs internally. Perhaps this was the great secret. Access to the divine did not depend on temples, priests, or intermediaries, but on an inner journey that anyone could undertake, as long as they were prepared for it. This knowledge may have been considered dangerous to the religious and political authorities of the time. A teaching that says each individual can connect directly with God threatens any power structure that relies on hierarchies and mediations. This would explain why certain groups tried to suppress this type of wisdom, and why the followers of Christ who preserved this teaching had to operate in the shadows. Another fascinating aspect of this possible secret society was the way they transmitted their knowledge. Some texts suggest that Jesus' closest disciples used specific rituals and practices to deepen their connection with the divine. Baptism, for example, might have been more than just a simple symbol of purification. Some Gnostics believed it was a profound spiritual process of initiation. Furthermore, there are records of contemplative and meditative practices associated with some aspects of early Christianity. In the first centuries, monks known as hesychasts used breathing techniques and mantra repetition to reach heightened states of consciousness. Could these practices be remnants of a secret knowledge passed down by the disciples of the Way? References to this esoteric tradition are not only found in Christian texts. There are striking parallels between the hidden teachings of Jesus and Eastern philosophies, such as Taoism and Zen Buddhism. Both emphasize the direct experience of divine reality and the abandonment of ego illusions. How is it possible that such similar ideas have emerged in such distinct contexts? Some researchers suggest that Jesus may have come into contact with Eastern traditions before beginning his mission. Another possibility is that his teachings naturally aligned with universal truths found in various cultures. If there truly was a group of disciples who preserved this knowledge, they may have been the root of various mystic movements that emerged later. Some currents of early Christianity, such as Gnosticism, seem to have inherited this view, but were harshly persecuted by the official church. In the 13th century, the Cathars, a Christian group considered heretical, also argued that salvation came through direct knowledge and not from blind obedience to doctrine. The big question is, has this esoteric knowledge survived over time? If so, where can it be found today? Is it possible that certain contemporary spiritual traditions still carry fragments of this lost wisdom? To answer these questions, we need to understand how the repression of institutionalized Christianity silenced these traditions and why certain groups were erased from history. In the next part, we will explore how political and religious power crushed the disciples of the Way and their secret teachings, and what evidence remains of this clash. If there was a secret society within early Christianity, with access to esoteric knowledge, the inevitable question is, who tried to silence them? If we analyze history, we will see that whenever a group holds knowledge that challenges the prevailing power structure, it becomes a target of repression. And with the disciples of the Way, the situation was no different. The persecution of the early Christians is well documented. Initially, the Roman Empire did not view Christianity as a major threat, but as the Christian faith grew, the empire began to realize that this new belief undermined the authority of the Roman gods and weakened the worship of the emperor. For Rome, Christianity was not just a different religion, it was a revolutionary movement. But what if the persecution wasn't just against Christians in general? What if certain groups within early Christianity were specific targets? It's possible that those who preserved esoteric knowledge were the most threatened. The Romans weren't the only ones interested in erasing this secret society. The Jewish religious authorities of the time also saw Christianity as a heresy. One of the first cases of persecution was the death of James, brother of Jesus, who, according to historical sources, was murdered by order of the high priest Ananias II. James was a leadership figure within the Christian community in Jerusalem, and some traditions suggest that he had special knowledge about Jesus' deepest teachings. His death may have been an attempt to eradicate a specific current of Christianity, which was still strongly tied to Jewish traditions and possibly held esoteric secrets. But the real offensive against Christianity came in the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine adopted Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. This moment, which at first glance may seem like a victory for Christians, in fact marked the beginning of the suppression of alternative teachings. The Council of Nicea, held in the year 325 AD, was a watershed moment. Convened by Constantine, this council gathered Christian leaders to define a single, official doctrine. And what happens when a single doctrine is chosen? Everything that does not fit into it is eliminated. This was the fate of many texts considered heretical, which brought alternative views about Jesus, his message, and the mysteries of the universe. The Gnostic Gospels, for example, were excluded from the Bible. Texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gospel of Philip contained ideas about an individual path to enlightenment, the rejection of dogmas, and the possibility of a direct connection with the divine, without the need for an institutional structure. These teachings were dangerous for the emerging church, which required a clear hierarchy and control over what was accepted or not. Another example is the Gospel of Judas, discovered in 2006, which presents a completely different version of the story of Judas Iscariot. Instead of a traitor, he is depicted as someone who received secret knowledge directly from Jesus and was instructed to hand over his master so that the mission could be fulfilled. This narrative drastically changes the perception of Judas's role and may indicate that there was a circle of disciples who understood teachings far beyond what was recorded in the canonical Gospels. But how did the Church manage to eradicate this secret knowledge? The answer lies in the systematic repression of heresies. Throughout the centuries, any group attempting to revive esoteric ideas from early Christianity was brutally persecuted. A clear example of this were the Cathars, a medieval Christian group who claimed to possess secret knowledge about the true message of Christ. They believed that the material world was an illusion, and that only through inner knowledge could one achieve true salvation. Their philosophy strongly resembled what the Gnostics preached centuries before. The Church could not allow such a different view of Christianity to flourish. In 1209, Pope Innocent III launched a crusade against the Cathars, exterminating their community in the south of France. Many accounts say that Cathar books and manuscripts were burned, possibly destroying any trace of ancient knowledge they might have preserved. Another persecuted group was the Order of the Templars, a powerful medieval organization that amassed wealth and influence. The official history states that the Templars were merely knights who protected pilgrims in the Holy Land. But there are indications that they possessed secret teachings and mystical rituals that could be connected to the hidden knowledge of the early Christians. Accused of heresy by the King of France, the Templars were arrested, tortured, and executed in the 14th century. Throughout the centuries, many other movements have been silenced in the same way. But if these groups were persecuted for harboring forbidden knowledge, it leads us to an even bigger question. What exactly were they protecting? Was it just a different interpretation of Christ's teachings, or was there something deeper? Some theorists believe that this hidden knowledge involved secrets about the true nature of the human being and their connection with the divine. Others suggest that these groups kept information about Jesus' fate after the resurrection, about his lineage, or even about his possible relationship with other ancient spiritual traditions. Whatever the truth may be, the fact is that history was written by the winners, and those who held a different knowledge from the official version were systematically eradicated. But as it always happens with powerful ideas, they never completely disappear. There are always those who find ways to preserve the truth, even if in a hidden way. So the question remains, if this esoteric knowledge survived, where is it now? Could there be spiritual descendants of these disciples of the way, guarding the secrets that were forbidden? This quest for hidden knowledge leads us to one of the most intriguing mysteries of early Christianity, the secret lineage of the disciples. Could they have left spiritual or even physical descendants who still carry this legacy? If the disciples of the way truly preserved secret knowledge, an inevitable question arises. Did they pass this knowledge forward? Would they have left a hidden lineage, spiritual or even physical, that carries the original teachings of Christ to this day? This is one of the greatest mysteries of early Christianity. The idea that certain groups or individuals were chosen to preserve special knowledge re-emerges throughout history in various traditions. And among Jesus' disciples, the figure that most fuels this hypothesis is Mary Magdalene. Throughout the centuries, her image has been profoundly altered by the official Christian tradition. However, the apocryphal Gospels, especially the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, portray her as a special disciple, someone who would have received direct teachings from Jesus, different from the teachings passed on to the rest of the apostles. In some passages, Peter shows jealousy of the knowledge that Mary possessed, suggesting that there was something more reserved only for her. But what if this relationship was even deeper? Some theories suggest that Mary Magdalene and Jesus were more than just teacher and student. They could have been spiritual companions or even husband and wife. This hypothesis gained strength with the discovery of the Gospel of Philip, a Gnostic text where there are references to a special relationship between the two. It mentions that Jesus often kissed her on the mouth, and that the other disciples were uncomfortable with their closeness. If this connection was so intense, a fascinating possibility arises. What if Mary Magdalene was pregnant when Jesus was crucified? This theory, popularized by books such as the Da Vinci Code, suggests that Mary Magdalene fled persecution in Jerusalem and traveled to Gaul, where she would have given birth to a secret lineage that preserved the hidden legacy of Christ's teachings. According to some medieval traditions, Mary would have settled in the south of France, where her presence was revered in certain esoteric orders, such as the Cathars and the Templars. But if there was a hidden lineage, what was its true purpose? Just to preserve a sacred bloodline, or to guard a spiritual knowledge that could transform humanity? Some currents claim that this lineage carried an ancestral wisdom, transmitted through generations, and kept secret to protect it from persecutions. We cannot ignore that, throughout history, various movements have emerged claiming to be the guardians of an alternative Christian knowledge. The Cathars, for example, were a medieval Christian sect that defended a completely different view of the traditional faith. They rejected the Roman Church, believed in reincarnation, and followed a path of inner enlightenment, concepts that strongly resemble Gnosticism. Another group shrouded in mystery are the Templars, the famous order of knights that emerged in the Middle Ages. Some historians believe that the Templars found secret documents in Jerusalem during the Crusades and began to guard this hidden knowledge. There are indications that they venerated a figure called Baphomet, which some interpret as a hidden version of the Gnostic Christ. When they were persecuted by the King of France and the Church, many Templars fled and hid in different parts of Europe, taking with them secrets that have not been fully revealed to this day. And what if this spiritual lineage of the disciples of the Way has fragmented, but never completely disappeared? Some theorists believe that certain modern esoteric societies, such as the Rosicrucians and the Masons, preserve fragments of this ancient knowledge. In their rituals, we find symbols and messages that refer back to early Christianity and the mysteries of initiation. But there is an even deeper question. Is this lineage purely physical, or is there a spiritual legacy that can be accessed by anyone? The concept of spiritual succession is something present in various traditions. Many wisdom schools believe that true knowledge is not transmitted only by blood, but by inner awakening. Disciples of the Way may have understood that the most important thing was not to preserve a genetic lineage, but rather a state of elevated consciousness, which could be accessed by those who follow a path of enlightenment. This leads us to one of Jesus' most enigmatic teachings: the kingdom of God is within you. If we interpret this sentence from an esoteric perspective, we can understand that the true secret of the disciples was not an external power, but rather an internal state of connection with the divine. And what if this was the real lineage of Christ? Not a specific group of people, but a universal consciousness that anyone could access, as long as they were ready for it. But if this idea is so powerful, why was it suppressed? Why throughout history have certain groups been persecuted for believing in the possibility of a direct connection with the divine? The answer may lie in the need for control. Since ancient times, large religious institutions have maintained their power through the idea that only they possess the path to God. The possibility that any individual can spiritually awaken without the need for intermediaries is something that threatens this structure. If this hidden lineage of the disciples of the Way has survived, whether physically or spiritually, it means that the knowledge they were protecting may still be accessible to those who seek it sincerely. The question that remains is there a way to reclaim this lost knowledge? Or has it been fragmented throughout history, leaving only traces scattered among different traditions. The answer may lie in the rituals and spiritual practices that these hidden disciples left behind. Could there still be secret techniques and teachings found in ancient texts or within groups that preserve these traditions? This search leads us to the next stage of our investigation: the secret rituals and practices of the disciples of the Way. What really happened at their hidden meetings? What kind of teachings and rituals were only passed on to the initiates? If the disciples of the Way truly formed a secret society, preserving hidden teachings of Jesus, how did they transmit this knowledge? Were there specific practices, secret rituals, or initiation forms reserved only for the initiated? The answer may be hidden in the fragments of history and in the forbidden texts that were erased by the official tradition. Over the centuries, esoteric societies claiming to have connections with the original teachings of Christ adopted certain rituals and symbols that could trace back to the practices of the first followers of the Way. To better understand this possibility, we need to analyze the secret baptisms, initiation rites, and hidden symbols that may reveal clues about this spiritual lineage. The secret baptisms and spiritual purification baptism is one of the central rituals of Christianity, but its origin dates back to much older practices. The Essenes, a mystical Jewish sect from the time of Jesus, performed baptisms not as a simple conversion ritual, but as an ongoing practice of spiritual purification. Some sources suggest that John the Baptist was part of this group, which would explain why he baptized people as part of an inner transformation process. But there is something even more intriguing. The baptism practiced by the early Christians was not just a dip in water, but a ritual that could involve a secret teaching. In the Gnostic Gospels, there are references to a spiritual baptism that goes beyond mere purification. In the Gospel of Philip, for example, a baptism of fire and a baptism of light are mentioned, suggesting that true initiation involved a mystical experience where the initiate could have direct contact with the divine presence. If this is true, we may be facing one of the biggest differences between institutionalized Christianity and the hidden teachings of the disciples of the Way. While the official church preserved baptism as a physical ritual, the secret tradition may have maintained a spiritual baptism, a process of internal transformation where the initiate reached a new level of consciousness. The initiations and esoteric teachings. If there was esoteric knowledge, it is likely that it was transmitted through initiation rituals. This was common in many mystery schools of the time, such as the Egyptian, Greek, and Persian traditions. Some of these initiations involved physical and mental tests, where the candidate needed to demonstrate they were ready to receive the sacred teaching. The disciples of Jesus may have followed a similar pattern, with a small group of chosen ones receiving teachings at deeper levels. Some passages from the Bible suggest that Jesus spoke more openly to the people, but reserved certain explanations only for his closest disciples. In the Gospel of Mark, for example, there is a passage where Jesus says, "To you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but for those on the outside, everything is told in parables." This clearly indicates that there was hidden knowledge, accessible only to those who were ready to receive it. Another clue comes from the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus repeatedly talks about the importance of seeking the truth for oneself, suggesting that true knowledge could not be conveyed through fixed doctrines, but should be experienced directly. Some researchers suggest that the disciples of the Way practiced meditation techniques and altered states of consciousness to access this spiritual knowledge. This could include periods of fasting, deep prayers, and even practices similar to what we know today as mystical contemplation. The symbols and secret codes. Another fascinating aspect is the use of hidden symbols to convey knowledge without attracting the attention of the authorities. As the early Christians were persecuted, they needed to find ways to communicate without being detected. The fish symbol, for instance, is one of the most well-known. Although today it is widely associated with Christianity, Few know that it may have been a recognition symbol among initiates. The word for fish in Greek is ichthys, the letters of which form an acronym for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. However, some say that the fish also represented the concept of duality and spiritual crossing, being used by secret groups to indicate an inner path to enlightenment. Another symbol that may have origins in the secret society of disciples is the anchor, which was found in some early Christian catacombs. The anchor may have represented the connection between the physical and spiritual world, indicating that the true disciple needed to be anchored in inner knowledge to withstand external storms. Interestingly, some medieval esoteric orders, such as the Templars and the Rosicrucians, also adopted similar symbols. This raises the possibility that part of this knowledge may have been preserved in secret circles over the centuries. The hidden meaning of the Last Supper. Another ritual that may have been different within the secret society of the disciples of the Way is the Lord's Supper. While in the common Christian tradition, the Holy Supper represents communion and the remembrance of Jesus' sacrifice, some interpretations suggest that it may have been a mystical initiation ritual. In the Gnostic Gospels, the Last Supper is described not just as a meal, but as a moment where Jesus reveals profound secrets about the nature of reality. There are passages where he mentions a wine of wisdom and a bread of truth, suggesting that these elements had a symbolic meaning far beyond what the later tradition maintained. Some theories suggest that the original Last Supper could have been a ritual of spiritual transformation, where the participants were led to an elevated state of consciousness. This fits with older mystical traditions, where rituals involving food and drinks were used to alter perception and open portals to divine knowledge. If the disciples of the Way truly practiced these secret initiations, what happened to these rituals? Were they completely lost? Or are there still fragments hidden in secret spiritual traditions? The answer may lie in the influence that these practices have had throughout history. Some esoteric currents claim that certain groups have preserved these rites, disguising them within later symbols and traditions. This leads us to the next crucial question. Can the impact of the secret society of the Way's disciples still be felt in today's world? Are there spiritual descendants of these rituals that continue to influence modern movements? If the disciples of the Way truly formed a secret society and preserved hidden teachings of Jesus, an inevitable question arises. Do these insights still have an impact on today's world? Could fragments of this tradition still exist, influencing modern groups, religions, or spiritual practices? History shows us that knowledge never completely disappears. Even when persecuted and suppressed, it finds ways to survive, whether through symbols, coded texts, or oral traditions passed down from generation to generation. With the secret society of the disciples of the Way, this may have happened in the same way. The resurgence of interest in the apocryphal texts equals. In recent centuries, archaeological discoveries have changed our understanding of early Christianity. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library has brought to light Gospels and Gnostic texts that were suppressed by the official church. These texts, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gospel of Judas, reveal a different side of Christ's message, closer to mysticism than to traditional doctrine. They speak of an inner knowledge, an awakening of consciousness, and a path of personal enlightenment, something that resonates strongly with esoteric teachings and the idea of a closed circle of disciples guarding sacred knowledge. The big question is, if this knowledge has been lost for so long, are there modern groups that still preserve parts of it? The influence on secret societies and esoteric traditions. Many esoteric orders throughout history have claimed to have connections with secret knowledge about Christ and his disciples. Among them, the Templars, the Cathars, the Rosicrucians, and some branches of Freemasonry stand out. The Cathars, for example, were a medieval Christian group who believed that Christ's true message was different from the official church doctrine. They rejected materialism, believed in reincarnation, and preached a path of inner purity. As a result, they were brutally persecuted and exterminated in the 13th century. Some theories suggest that they were the last remnants of a spiritual lineage initiated by the disciples of the Way. The Templars in turn were accused of heresy in the 14th century, and one of the accusations was that they practiced secret rituals different from the traditional church. Some legends claim that the Templars found ancient documents in Jerusalem, possibly linked to a lost knowledge about Jesus and his hidden teachings. As for the Rosicrucians, an esoteric society that emerged in the 17th century, they claim to preserve mystical knowledge about the spiritual transformation of the human being. Their texts speak of an enlightenment process, which closely resembles the Gnostic teachings attributed to the hidden disciples. Whatever the truth may be, the fact is that throughout history, various groups have emerged claiming special knowledge about the teachings of Christ. Whether these groups are direct remnants of the secret society of disciples or merely attempts to recover lost knowledge is still an open question. Esoteric Christianity and the path to enlightenment. Beyond secret societies, some modern Christian traditions have also adopted a more mystical approach to Jesus' message. The so-called esoteric Christianity, for example, interprets Christ's teachings as a code for inner transformation, not just as a dogmatic doctrine. This vision is close to Eastern philosophies, which talk about self-discovery, enlightenment, and elevated states of consciousness. Some modern interpretations suggest that Jesus taught something very similar to what we now know as meditation, consciousness expansion, and direct contact with the divine. This connects with a trend that has been growing in recent years, the search for spirituality outside of traditional religions. Many people today feel that something is missing in the rigid doctrines of organized religions and are seeking a more personal path to connect with the sacred. And what if this was exactly the purpose of the secret society of the Way's disciples? To preserve a knowledge that allows each individual to find their own connection with God, without the need for intermediaries. The legacy in today's world. Where is this knowledge now? If the secret society of disciples somehow survived, where can this knowledge be found today? There are some possibilities. In the ancient texts that have been rediscovered, such as the Gnostic Gospels, which are being increasingly studied by researchers and spiritualists. In modern spiritual traditions, many Christian esoteric currents talk about the awakening of consciousness, the search for the kingdom of heaven within oneself, and enlightenment as an internal process. In the mysteries yet to be solved, there are symbols, sacred places, and manuscripts that may contain clues about the true message of the disciples of the Way. In people's own spiritual experience. If the esoteric knowledge spoke about individual enlightenment, this means that it does not depend on a specific group to survive. It can be accessed by anyone who seeks the truth with an open heart. If there's something we can learn from this journey, it's that the official history doesn't always tell the whole story. The possibility of a secret society preserving hidden spiritual teachings reminds us that there's still much to be discovered about the past and about ourselves. But the big question is, has this search ended, or are there still hidden secrets waiting to be revealed? If there is something we can do to get closer to this knowledge, perhaps it is to seek within ourselves. For as Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you." If the secret society of the disciples of the Way truly existed and preserved hidden teachings, the question that arises is, where is this knowledge today? Has it been completely erased from history, or are there still traces waiting to be discovered? Throughout the centuries, many mysteries and gaps have been left in the history of early Christianity. Missing documents, suppressed gospels, and secret orders make us ask, is there a lost knowledge that can transform our understanding of Jesus and his true message? The lost manuscripts and the forgotten gospels. Since the formation of the institutional church, various texts were considered dangerous and were excluded from the official Bible. But many of these documents did not disappear completely. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in the 20th century, revealed Gospels and ancient Christian writings that bring different versions of Christ's teachings. Among them, the following stand out. The Gospel of Thomas, which suggests that Jesus taught a path of self-discovery and inner enlightenment. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which portrays Mary as a special disciple who received secret teachings. The Gospel of Judas, which presents Judas not as a traitor, but as someone who received hidden knowledge directly from Jesus. The Gospel of Philip, which mentions rituals and practices that seem to have been reserved for a more intimate circle of disciples. If these texts were removed from the Bible, it's possible they contain information that the Church didn't want to be widely known. But what could this secret be? The mysterious places and the hidden secrets. Another intriguing factor is that there are places around the world that may hold clues about this lost knowledge. The Catacombs of Rome. Excavations have revealed enigmatic symbols left by the early Christians, some of which may have hidden meanings. The Qumran Cave, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, possibly written by the Essenes, a group that may have had contact with Jesus and his disciples. Cathar ruins in the south of France, where it is said that the last remnants of a hidden lineage of Christianity were exterminated by the Catholic Church. Ancient churches and temples. Some medieval cathedrals contain secret symbols, such as those found in Chartres Cathedral, which may be linked to lost knowledge. If there is still something to be discovered in these places, the question is, who is seeking this knowledge? The researchers and the search for true Christianity. With the advancement of archaeology and historical research, many scholars have been revisiting early Christianity in search of answers. Bart Ehrman, a renowned New Testament scholar, suggests that the Church shaped Jesus' teachings to fit into its power structure. Elaine Pagels, an expert in Gnostic Gospels, argues that early Christians had a more spiritual and mystical view of faith, before the Church established rigid dogmas. Henry Lincoln and Michael Begant, authors of The Holy Grail and the Sacred Lineage, suggest that the spiritual and perhaps even physical lineage of Jesus may have been preserved by secret societies. But perhaps the true guardians of this knowledge are not just academic researchers or historians. What if there are still groups that preserve this knowledge in a hidden way? The secret orders and the protection of knowledge. Over the centuries, various secret societies have claimed to safeguard forbidden knowledge. Could any of them still preserve fragments of the tradition of the disciples of the Way? The Templars. Many legends suggest that this order found secret documents in Jerusalem, possibly containing hidden truths about Jesus. The Rosicrucians, an esoteric society that advocates for spiritual enlightenment and a direct connection with the divine, something very similar to the teachings attributed to early Christianity. Freemasonry. Although many of its practices are symbolic, there is evidence that the Freemasons preserve mystical knowledge that may have roots dating back to the time of Christ. If these orders truly carry fragments of lost knowledge, will this wisdom ever be revealed to the world? What does this mean for the current world? If this secret knowledge somehow survived, it could change our view on Christianity and spirituality. Religion versus direct experience. Instead of relying on institutions, each individual could seek their own connection with God. The power of personal enlightenment. Jesus may have taught spiritual awakening techniques that were hidden by the Church. The key to humanity's transformation. If this knowledge is rediscovered, it has the potential to revolutionize our understanding of who we are and what our purpose is. But there is one final question to be answered. If this knowledge exists, could there still be disciples of the Way among us? Could this secret society still be active, silent, waiting for the right moment to reveal its truth to the world? This is the final question that leads us to the last part of our itinerary. Do the disciples of the way still exist? If throughout history the secret society of the disciples of the way has preserved hidden knowledge, the big question that remains is, does this group still exist today? Many mysteries remain unanswered. If this tradition has survived through time, it probably has not revealed itself to the world openly. But there are signs and indications that fragments of this knowledge may be being preserved, waiting for the right moment to emerge again. The guardians of lost knowledge. Since ancient times, secret societies have been identified as possible heirs to this knowledge. The persecution that the early Christians faced caused dissident groups to need to operate in the shadows. If this wisdom was so precious, could some disciples have found a way to protect it? Throughout history, various orders have emerged claiming to have access to spiritual secrets. Some of them share concepts that strongly resemble the teachings of the Gnostic Gospels and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Order of the Essenes. This group, which existed during the time of Jesus, may have been one of the first to preserve a deeper knowledge about spirituality. Some believe that certain teachings of Christ were strongly influenced by them. The Cathars. They claimed to be the true guardians of early Christian wisdom and were persecuted by the Church in the 13th century. Could part of this knowledge have survived after their extermination? The Templars. According to some legends, the Templars found secret documents in Jerusalem containing information about a hidden lineage of disciples. Some say that part of this knowledge was preserved by groups that descend from them. The Rosicrucians. They argue that true spiritual transformation occurs through inner knowledge and the search for the divine within one's self, a concept very close to what the Gnostic Gospels suggest. Freemasonry. Some Masonic traditions refer to a quest for the light, which may be related to the ancient esoteric teachings of Jesus and his disciples. If these groups have preserved parts of this knowledge, a new question arises. Why haven't they revealed the truth to the world yet? The silence and the need for secrecy. If this secret society truly exists, there is a reason for its discretion. Many mysteries and hidden knowledge have been erased from history for a simple reason: the fear of the power they could bring to humanity. Knowledge liberates. If the esoteric teachings of the disciples spoke about a direct connection with the divine, without the need for intermediaries, this threatens the structure of large organized religions. The pursuit of hidden knowledge. Since ancient times, any doctrine that challenged the control of religious and political institutions has been suppressed. The preparation of humanity. Some esoteric traditions suggest that hidden knowledge can only be revealed when humanity is ready to understand it and not use it in a destructive way. If the disciples of the way still exist as a secret society, it may be that they are waiting for the right time to reveal their teachings to the world. But are there signs that this moment is approaching? The signs of a new spiritual awakening. In recent years, we have seen a growing interest in spirituality outside of traditional dogmas. More and more people are seeking answers beyond organized religions, exploring concepts of enlightenment, consciousness expansion, and direct connection with the divine. Rediscovery of the lost Gospels. With the advancement of archaeology and historical research, apocryphal texts such as the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene are being studied like never before. The growth of alternative spiritual traditions. Many modern spiritual schools talk about the awakening of consciousness and the search for the kingdom of heaven within us, echoing the teachings of the hidden disciples. The interest in secret societies. People are becoming increasingly curious about what might be hidden behind orders such as the Templars and the Rosicrucians. The advancement of science and spirituality. Discoveries in quantum physics and neuroscience are starting to validate concepts that were previously only spiritual, such as the idea that reality is shaped by consciousness. If all of this is part of a larger movement, it could be a sign that the knowledge of the disciples of the Way is beginning to re-emerge. What does this mean for us? If this lost knowledge truly exists and is beginning to re-emerge, the big question is, what can we do with it? Seek truth beyond dogmas, not to simply accept the official version of events, but to explore the various texts, traditions, and evidence that have been forgotten. Develop inner spirituality. If the hidden disciples spoke about an inner enlightenment, this means that each of us can seek this awakening. Understanding that history was manipulated, recognizing that much of what we were taught about Christianity may have been shaped to serve specific interests. Explore hidden knowledge. Apocryphal texts, esoteric teachings, and hidden symbols may contain clues about what really happened. If the disciples of the Way still exist in some form, be it as a secret society or as a spiritual lineage, this means that their knowledge may be available to those who are ready to find it. The final question is, are we ready for this truth? The mystery is not yet over. Perhaps the key to the answer is closer than we think. After all, if the kingdom of heaven is within us, maybe the secrets of the disciples of the Way are too.